Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as ours, but hey, it's something. This video might lead to another reaction video. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And I have no clue if it'll be a positive one or a negative one. I don't have any reason to think that it would be a negative one. Maybe it will be. But you know the rules, and so do I. If there's a reaction video to this, I react to that reaction video. And one last bit of housekeeping is that I'm thinking of trying to do like a formal schedule for like my podcasts. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, could there be, like, room for, like, doing a certain number of things every month? Like, you know, with some exceptions here and there, like, just trying to do something, like, somewhat consistent. Like, I mean, it's a very big ask. Like, every month have a thoughts on, or every month has, like, a thing that ties back into, like, the previous things of, like, my years of this channel. And I'm trying to think of, like, a formal schedule to, like, try and do stuff with. But the thing is, like, I can't do it too much because I want to leave, like, at least some room for, like, big topical events. But if you notice a pattern, you'll notice a pattern. Like, and it's a pattern. I've been trying to do, like, some sort of pattern for a while. Like, you know, you'll notice that I don't, like, when I very early on, when I had thoughts on, like, sometimes I do, like, a thoughts on, and then the next episode will be a thoughts on. Like, I'm trying to avoid that. Space things out so I can make videos bigger and better. Alright, with the housekeeping out of the way, let's get right into the news. This one will be interesting because, like, basically all of the news stories are foreign news with the exception of one. Oh boy, that's going to be interesting. Okay, so the first news story is coming from Haiti, and it's a very big one that I don't think a lot of people know. You may remember not that long ago, the president of Haiti was assassinated, which has led to a political crisis that has been going on for a while. And the political crisis has gotten 10 times worse as all of the senators that remained in the legislature, their terms have expired, meaning that Haiti technically does not have any democratically elected, like, members of parliament or any elected officials. They technically do have some people who are still serving in acting roles. Like, I think the only government position that they have is, like, an acting prime minister, which is concerned because it's like they're a person who claimed the role of the prime minister and then just took over. So Haiti is spiraling into anarchy. Very, like, honestly, there is not much else I could say. And it's because it's such an unheard of concept to me that it's just perplexing to me, like, the idea that this would happen. I guess we'll move on to the next one that is also one that I don't have much to say just because it's pretty obviously bad. The Israeli security minister orders the removal of Palestinian flags from public spaces. Israel's national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has ordered police to remove Palestinian flags from public spaces, calling their display as a form of supporting terror. Palestinian-American author Yusuf Meniver tweeted in response, "Israel holds an entire stateless nation under military occupation. They got enough nukes to start regional conflagration, but they fear a piece of cloth." Because that is unfortunately just how things are. Like, there was one time where the Israeli government literally banned the use of the colors red, green, and black in paintings. Like, any form of thing that had, like, a red, green, and black in it was declared, like, illegal. Like, you couldn't do that because it was considered like you're trying to support the Palestinians. And as a protest, there was actually a bunch of people who, like, started, like, using watermelons as a form of protest because watermelons have black, green, and red in it. And it was because an artist just painted a picture of a watermelon, and then they were arrested because of this stupid law that Israel had. We live in a society where symbols have power, and, you know, it's a symbol with a lot of power. Let's get the buzzwords in. Israel's an apartheid state. Free Palestine. David Pakman's an idiot. Speaking of governments that hate minorities, Peru. Now, I know what you're going to say. Peru? Wouldn't Israel fit more with this than Peru? Like, shouldn't Peru have been the lead up? Well, here's the interesting headline. New President Boliarte faces genocide inquiry. That's definitely something that'll catch your attention, and at the very least makes it look like Israel is doing the least bad. because I guess technically what they're doing isn't a genocide, it's merely apartheid. But this genocide inquiry comes from the fact that many protesters against the Boulard government were killed by police, particularly those of the indigenous community. And it's sad that Boulard has screwed this up so royally. It's literally just like, your one duty was, okay, this guy tried to overthrow the government. Now your job is to sit there and calmly help push for the next election. And basically, they've just been royally screwing this up because Boulard has basically just joined up with the right-wing opposition. And she's basically going for every single right-wing argument in regards to this. These protesters are like bad people and blah, blah, blah. And one of the biggest things that she's doing is that she's now blaming foreign governments for the protests, which is, again, a common thing that Latin American right-wing governments do. She has even forbidden Evo Morales from entering the country because she's trying to claim that he is trying to instigate the protesters. And it's just, you had one job. And there are people who are literally trying to consider her part of the pink tide. It's just like, well, okay, I guess if you want to be stupid about it, then whatever. Speaking of Latin American governments and protesting, oh boy, the day after I recorded the last podcast, Brazilian right-wingers decided to, I guess to borrow what the mainstream media was trying to say, do their own January 6th. I was originally kind of mad at that idea, like, oh, why do you keep comparing everything to American politics? But then it's like, okay, maybe this is a little bit more comparable because I did see a picture of like a guy who was literally just trying to rip off the QAnon shaman, and it's like, okay, maybe it's a little bit more comparable than I thought. Because some of the people actually try to compare like what Pedro Castillo did to January 6th. It's like, this is not comparable at all. And a lot of people like to shorthand like foreign politicians, like, they're basically the Mexican Trump, or the Mexican Bernie, or the Brazilian Bernie, or the Brazilian Trump, or the Argentinian Trump. It's like, can you stop doing that? Can you like define the, I guess to many like stupid Americans, it makes sense, but you know, sometimes it's just weird to compare it. The only difference between like January 6th and this were like, well, actually there were a couple of differences. For starters, Lula had already become president. Like, in America, like, I mean, well, actually, that's not comparable because Biden had already become president as well. Because, here's the thing, America, the whole certifying of the Electoral College, that's a formality. It's done. Like, the second they send their electors, it's over. The second that the states certify, this candidate won the state, it's over. But in Brazil, like, literally, it was over way before it even began, because literally you have to certify the transfer of power before anything else can be done, and Bolsonaro certified it almost immediately. And second, they invaded an empty house that was like the area. They invaded some place that was empty. It was literally all for show, because in Brazil all they could do is do stuff for show because they can't do anything of substance because it's over. There were a couple of things that did raise some suspicions, and that is what's leading to current things. You see, because if you remember, Bolsonaro actually left Brazil before this happened, and so too did the former Justice Minister Anderson Torres. They were out of the country when this happened. So, much like America, there's a big investigation to figure out how deep did these two know about what is going on. But the difference is, Brazil, they're not screwing around because they fully understand that a military dictatorship and fascist takeover of government is very much something that can happen. In America, we can take pride in like, I guess stupidity or whatever. We can pretend like, oh, see, it'll never happen to us because it did almost happen to us and we overcame it. But in Brazil, there was a time period where they were literally run by a far-right dictatorship. And a lot of things have been happening as of recent. For starters, one of the big things that's been going on is that a lot of the rioters have been pushed into a gym that have been dubbed the Lulag because people are stupid. And when I heard that it's a gym Like, I thought the whole, like, problem with, like, the Lulag was, like, it was an actual, like, prison. But it's like, no, it's a gym. They're being held in a gym. And the far-right media is trying to, like, claim, oh, like, people are committing suicide. People are getting killed in there. Lula is a super far-left, like, person. It's like, really? On the plus side, and Anderson Torres has officially been arrested. Bolsonaro is going to be investigated because, again, Lula's not screwing around. Americans are like fucking brain dead and are like, oh, well, we have to like make sure that we need to understand and then we have to like look into like the Constitution. Like, did they actually break any laws? And it's like, guys, are you stupid? You're seriously gonna be here like these guys who like broke into our Capitol with like military gear, with like merchandise that literally said on January 6th we are going to take the Capitol. The people who were like constantly posting that they wanted to like murder Nancy Pelosi and AOC. Like, these are the guys you're gonna sit here and pretend like, I don't know if these guys were like, if this is like under our like First Amendment laws, like, because you can protest. And another thing that is showing how serious Brazil is taking this is they have went to a ton of social media companies and basically said, here's a list of all these prominent people who we know for a fact actively are calling for these guys to be like freed, calling for these people to be like doing apologetics for the people who are doing these riots. We want you to ban every single one of them. And a couple of them have been banned off of social media pages. And as soon as you heard me say banned off of social media pages, in comes the people who pretend desperately that they are not part of the right wing. The most relevant one for this particular topic is Glenn Greenwald, who is trying to desperately explain why this is actually a bad thing, even though a lot of the people who they're banning, like one of the biggest ones that has been banned is this one Brazilian content creator named Monarch. This guy is considered the Brazilian Joe Rogan, who has previously made some very incendiary comments and has continued to make very incendiary comments. One incendiary comment that he made previously was the idea that he wanted Brazil to legalize Nazism. Now, if you don't know, yes, it is illegal to be a Nazi in Brazil because Brazil had a lot of German immigrants that came during World War II, which led to a lot of far-right thought in the country. It led to a large amount of Nazism. Like, many people in Brazil were like affiliated with the Nazi Party of Germany. Some were there to spread propaganda. Some were there to just live their lives in a country that wasn't Brazil. And some people were Nazis fleeing persecution. The biggest example I can think of is Joseph Mengele, who literally drowned in Brazil. And due to this, Brazil has actually tried to take a lot of big actions to try and prevent any further spread of far-right ideologies in the country. They managed to elect Bolsonaro, so it hasn't been 100% effective, but they've tried. That's in fact a very common thing with like Latin American, like particularly South American countries, because a lot of Germans fled to South America. So there are a lot of areas that are both like willingly and unwillingly basically like Nazi areas. Like there's some area, like in some of the areas, they're not even like explicitly like they're not like they like love the Nazis or whatever. But it's an area where it's just like swastikas are everywhere because that's just what they know. You see, this is one section of American politics that is just like everybody knows it exists except for the people who are part of it. Like, they're people who claim to be on the left, and like a lot of people try to pretend like, I remember like I got some arguments with this where people were like, you see, why would they pretend to be left-wingers? Why would these people like go further left when if they wanted more money, they'd go right? But it's like, no, you can still get right-wing money if you're left-wing, quote-unquote, just as long as you pretend that you're left-wing while doing everything that right-wingers love. Like, these are people that are on paper left-wing. Like, if they tell you, like, what is their actual political position, like, oh no, you see, I support Medicare for all, I support LGBTQ rights, I support, like, raising the minimum wage, I support, like, environmental protections, I support nationalizing industries. But then when you look at their actions, they just do nothing except for do, like, basically everything a right-winger does. Jimmy Dore, Shiwan Head, Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, Nico House, Fiorella Isabel, formerly Sargon of Akkad, relevant to the topic of the video. But these are people that they do literally everything, like, in practice, they do literally exclusively right-wing things, but on paper, like, in theory, they're left-wingers, but in praxis, they are not. Last news story before we get into the main topic is basically everything that's been going on in the California Senate race. Because here's the thing, the California Senate race has almost immediately gotten very heated, very fast. For those who don't remember, in 2024, California will be having one of its Senate seats go open. The Senate seat in question is the one currently held by Dianne Feinstein. And if you know anything about this channel, you'll know that a lot of people have been very critical of Dianne Feinstein, with many Democrats trying to get rid of her in 2018, and us being told, you guys are dumb, you shouldn't do this, you're being ageist. But now for this upcoming election, every single Democrat is basically trying to get Feinstein to retire. The wake-up call was the California recall election, where Larry Elder basically ran his campaign with, if you vote for me, when Dianne Feinstein dies, I'll be able to appoint her replacement. And people realized, if a person running for a seat can actually run on that and actually resonate a lot of people to vote for them, I think we need to start replacing someone. And also, Dianne Feinstein has been showing to be going into a lot of cognitive decline ever since that last cycle. See, in 2018, it was grandma levels. Occasionally she might forget something, but, like, overall she's fine. But this time, this is, like, great grandma levels, where it's like, she would have to be people who were like, hey, I just came in and said, hey, how you doing, Dianne? And then she'd basically be like, hi, how are you doing? It's like, this is the 5th time we've met, and she doesn't even remember who I am. She'd have to be reminded that certain colleagues of hers passed away, and it appears that Feinstein or her aides are listening, because there has been, like, she's been steadily moving away from sort of, like, mainstream public forces. And one of the biggest indications that she was, like, listening was the fact that she declined the position of Senate President pro tempore, which is the seat that is held by the leading, like, the oldest serving member of the leading caucus. So Patty Murray took it instead. If she ends up retiring, this would be only the second open Senate seat in California in the past 30 years, and the first one of this seat specifically to be open since 1982. And a lot of Democrats have been desperately trying to get Feinstein to retire, particularly ones that were snubbed for the other Senate seat when Kamala Harris left to become vice president. And a lot of them have been pretty much making it open secrets that they want Feinstein to retire. But a majority of them have been trying to be nice and have been waiting for Feinstein to officially announce whether or not they were going to run for the seat or not. Because under a technicality, they are running, but only under a technicality, because most incumbents basically automatically file to run for the next term, just so they can keep their campaign cash flowing in, and to keep their options open, just in case they do want to run for the seat, so they don't have to, like, file in the aftermath. 4 people in particular were very much looked at as potential candidates, and one of them has decided to stop being nice and officially announced that they were going to run for the seat. That candidate in question, Katie Porter, announcing that she would forego running for re-election and forego the small draft campaigns to get her to run for president, and instead decide to run for Feinstein's seat. Now, Porter announcing this early obviously puts her in a very interesting, place, because she's trying to do a lot of things at once. You see, her announcing this early was very similar to when Lucas Kunce announced it early, because she's trying to get a bunch of Democrats to go back her immediately for the seat. Because a lot of Democrats are trying to do the thing, they've wanted to do this for a while, where they're like, we just want to back the person who will be the candidate. They don't want to go through any sort of like primary or democracy or any of that bull. They just want one person to be the candidate and just run with that candidate immediately. And, of course, Porter blew up on both lib Twitter and progressive Twitter, because Porter has essentially painted herself as literally the new Elizabeth Warren, which makes sense if you know literally anything about Katie Porter. And if you know anything about me, you know that I don't like Katie Porter. I made a whole Twitter thread about explaining why Katie Porter sucks, and I'm just going to go over it right now. TLDR, Porter is essentially Warren's AOC, her protege, if you will, which means she has a lot of Warren's strengths, but also a lot of her weaknesses. Particularly when it comes to military and foreign policy, she's very much just part of the Washington consensus. The first vote of hers that caught my eye was when she joined with the right-wing Democrats to vote for Tea Party Ken Buck's amendment to undermine Ro Khanna's Yemen bill. Ever since taking office, she has voted for all but one of the NDAAs. She voted for the reauthorization of the U.S. Freedom Act. She voted against Ilhan Omar's bill to end the war in Afghanistan. Off of foreign policy, she voted against AOC's amendment to study medical benefits of certain drugs. She voted against Cori Bush's amendment allowing people in jail to vote. So yeah, not a fan. Now, of course, I know a lot of the mainstream, political, commentators, they're not going to know this. Here's what they know. They know the video clips where she has the whiteboard because they can make videos about her with the whiteboard, basically going here's this video Katie Porter made showing how our Congress is bad. I draw on whiteboard to make up for fact that I'm a terrible candidate. Wow, this person knows what's up. Literally, I never considered Katie Porter a progressive until I saw Rational National make a video talking about, oh, these progressives voted bad. And it's wait, you guys thought Katie Porter was a progressive? What? Guys, there are libs literally using Katie Porter to bash on AOC. Katie Porter's literally the new Warren. Guys, you guys aren't seeing this? Of course none of them are seeing this, because they don't care. Another reason why Porter announced this early is so that she can try and get any of the other people who've been floated as potential Senate candidates to not run, because, she's considered, like Warren, she's considered the safe choice for everybody. The moderates and the progressives both see what they like in her. Another reason that she announced early was because her incumbent House seat is a flippable one, so she's trying to get people who want to run for that seat the ample opportunity to announce their runs, and someone did. A former moderate member of the House of Representatives, Harley Rauda, announced immediately that he would run for her seat. Now, like I mentioned before, there were 3 other prominent people that were floated as potential Senate candidates. The 2 that have still yet to be decided are one that progressives have been clamoring for a while, Ro Khanna, and the other one is one that many people have basically figured out wants to run for Senate, Adam Schiff. But with Porter running, people are worried that that was obvious to deter these 2. But the bigger deterrent comes from the fact that another person basically announced that they are going to run for the Senate seat as well. That person being Barbara Lee, who almost immediately after Porter's announcement went to the Congressional Black Caucus member meeting and basically declared that she was going to run for Senate in that seat as well, which is an even bigger deterrent than Katie Porter, particularly for one of the candidates that I mentioned. And, hear me now, quote me later, if she doesn't announce, immediately, the day that she's going to announce her Senate candidacy is on January 25th, because that's the day that Shirley Chisholm announced her presidential candidacy. And since she's basically, hitched her wagon to Shirley Chisholm, because Shirley Chisholm was her entrance into politics, she's obviously going to be running a lot on that with her Senate bid. And that has, of course, led to the biggest deterrent of Barbara Lee going to the Senate. You see, her announcing for Senate basically makes it so that every other candidacy afterwards would have to basically declare they don't want a black woman in the Senate. Because if you don't remember, with Kamala Harris leaving to be vice president, there are no longer any black women in the Senate. So Barbara Lee is more than likely going to try and run on that for her candidacy. Now, I've seen a small subsection of Bernie supporters basically still clamoring for Ro Khanna to run for Senate, even if it's him, Lee, and Porter. The biggest thing to make them choose to do so is the fact that both Katie Porter and Barbara Lee didn't endorse Bernie, ergo, neither of them are qualified to be the senator from California. Are you legitimately stupid? Are you legitimately brain dead? That's literally your only litmus for that? Like, that's your only litmus. They didn't endorse Bernie, ergo, they are unqualified. I would get that maybe if Barbara Lee was like a newer member of Congress. But Barbara Lee is a long-standing progressive figure that literally addresses every single criticism that people should have of Katie Porter. Like, remember all those bills that I listed about Katie Porter? Yeah, Barbara Lee voted the exact opposite on every single one of those bills. And those are my only complaints on Katie Porter. Ro obviously answers those critiques as well. But again, so does Barbara Lee. And all those people that are trying to be like, oh, well, Ro should still run. But it's like, Ro isn't going to run. And Ro won't run for one big reason. He's basically already indicated that he will not run if Barbara Lee runs. Because he admires Barbara Lee. And him and Barbara Lee share a lot of policies. Like, Ro doesn't have any path to victory anymore. The idea is, like, Barbara Lee would have to, like, the only path that Ro had would be if he ran against Katie Porter and he ran as the real progressive while she was the fake progressive. But that can't work when your other opponent is Barbara Lee. Adam Schiff, I don't know if he'll run or not. He might just bow out because, he'll probably back Porter, considering she's like the moderator option. But the fact of the matter is, if Barbara Lee announces that she's running for Senate, everybody on the left should be backing her because Barbara Lee is literally one of the best members of the House of Representatives. Now, why don't we see what the Republicans have to offer? Okay, so one of the only Republicans to fully announce a candidacy is Peter Y. Liu, a perennial candidate. Okay, let's see what his campaign committee is called. Peter Y. Liu for U.S. Senate 2024 against Jew supremacy in America. Okay, why don't we just move on to the main topic of the episode? As the title of the video suggests, this is a thoughts on a figure that I guess this one's a little bit more of a time capsule. Like, this is one of the ones that there's a lot more history prior than there is currently. Not to diss him, but there's not that much going on currently because a lot of when I get into what happens, you'll see why there isn't a lot of stuff currently. Okay, so first, who is this person? Thomas James Kirk III, better known as his YouTube handle, The Amazing Atheist, started his channel in 2006. If saying the date doesn't make you feel old, maybe the fact that it was 17 years ago will make you feel old. As the time frame suggests, he was one of the earliest YouTubers on the platform. So early that the idea of a YouTuber was literally just beginning. That was still in the time frame when a majority of the content on YouTube was crappy viral videos. You see, if you don't know anything about YouTube, there's actually like a lot of eras within YouTube history, and some of them will be tackled in this episode. YouTube's early beginning era was basically the viral video era. YouTube was like just beginning, so people were just pulling out their cameras and recording stuff, and maybe if you were lucky, one of the videos would just get incredibly popular. And then people saw that and decided, I can then make content to try and get popular. It's an era of YouTube a lot of us still think of when we hear the term YouTube or YouTuber. Some random schmuck like making videos for fun. Long before any of us knew what the word algorithm or demonetization or even monetization was. And almost immediately, we begun entering an era of the YouTuber, where rather than trying to make that one video to get big, people would make a lot of content with it varied from creator to creator on whether or not they wanted to go big or not. But since YouTube was like this brand spanking new platform, it was very barren. So even if people didn't like think in their mind like, I want to go big, they knew it was very possible to get like somewhat big in a particular niche. It's just weird to explain this at the early stage of YouTube due to how the YouTube has evolved to what it is now. Considering how long ago it was, we have people who are literally born after the creation of YouTube making YouTube videos now. But back to this era of YouTube, since it was an open field, people just ran to find a particular niche and then become popular there. Some people decided to make some funny sketches, like Smosh. Some people made media reviews, like the Angry Video Game Nerd. But TJ was part of a very large section of content on YouTube known as video rants. Literally just turn the camera on and talk about literally anything you want. Literally all you needed was a camera that didn't make too much noise, some field of competence in whatever you're talking about, or a personality that was not completely boring. And one of the reasons why this particular genre became popular was because of something that happened very early on in YouTube. You see, YouTube, very early on, you had the ability to create reply videos to other people's videos. Like if I made a video, a person could reply to my video, and then their video would be linked underneath my video. It was a system that was good until it was exploited by a bunch of attractive girls. You didn't need to use the reply feature to get big in this field, but it was a nifty tool if you did want to use it. Now, one of the big things about the video rant sphere was that you could literally make videos on anything, and people would just come to listen to what you have to say. TJ, however, decided to mostly make videos talking about religion, becoming the sort of online face of new atheism. What's that? You have no clue what new atheism is? New atheism was a new wave of atheism that came after the 1990s. What supposedly set them apart of atheists in the past was their so-called hardcoreness on the issue, I guess. Rather than living peacefully with theists, they believe that they must be challenged at all terms, being diehard against all forms of dogma. Mostly religion, but it did translate to other forms like political dogma, which was going to be relevant going forward. Another term that you could use to describe these people is something called anti-theists. Like, these were people that didn't want to just be known as atheists, though they did like the term, but they also wanted to be known as, like, anti-theists. Like, these were people who, like, they hated religion. These were violent, dangerous radicals that would go into bookstores and then take the King James Bible and then put it in the fiction section. Their views were mostly exemplified by the likes of Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, and Sam Harris. Technically, the fourth horseman of the new atheist movement is a philosopher by the name of Daniel Dennett, but considering I have no clue who he is, I'm going to say something controversial and make the case that T.J. Kirk actually has more claim to the title due to the fact that he is a lot more on the levels of Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Richard Dawkins. And I'm sure T.J. Kirk would very much also think that that's weird, but for good and for bad, that is true. And spoilers for later in the video, but the only reason why I say that is because a lot of people in the future in this sphere would very much credit T.J. Kirk in their thinking, and not someone like Daniel Dennett. Like, Dawkins, Harris, and Hitchens would also come up frequently, but T.J. would also come up very frequently. Now, I know it's, like, again, very big divide. Like, one of them is, like, a microbiologist or something, and the other is fat guy on YouTube. Again, while, of course, he was a bit divided in regards to, like, the intellectualism of their arguments. Like, the other three would consider themselves a bit more intellectual, whereas TJ would, not to be mean to TJ, but he's definitely not as well read and well spoken as, at the very least, Hitchens and Dawkins. Though to be fair, it's the British accents that make them sound a bit more smart. Now, with all this separation that I'm doing, why am I even claiming that he's part of this, four horsemen of the new atheist movement? Well, while he wasn't as well spoken as them, he definitely had, their brash, confrontational style. And he also served one more purpose. And it's the best purpose you could have for the movement. Being able to dumb down their arguments into layman's terms. That's literally the biggest thing you could do for any single political or religious movement. Being able to take, these big brain, big, long spiels, and then dumb it down to layman's terms. Every single communist needs to be able to learn how to take the Communist Manifesto, or Capital, and then dumb it down and then give it back to the people. And again, since the YouTube sphere was very barren, TJ was not only able to grow massive in this empty field, but was also able to basically kickstart an entire genre. The genre in question would become known as the Skeptic Community. Neckbeard started talking about God and atheism across the YouTube sphere. All of them basically attributing TJ as the reason that they did what they did. And in a way, it basically led to the creation of a new religion under the boot of TJ Kirk, which ended up leading to TJ just becoming more popular, and he would then expand upon his popularity, creating a podcast called The Drunken Peasants, going on Joe Rogan and CNN, deciding to cross over paths on YouTube to join the reviewing community under the alias The Distressed Watcher, to even shoving a banana in his ass. It wouldn't be any video on The Amazing Atheist if I didn't mention it at least once. But one thing remained clear. Whenever he was in a politics or a religion sphere, basically 99.9% of the time, he would focus his attention on Christian conservatism. Very rarely would he tackle other sort of political ideologies. Occasionally he'd critique, Obama, just, making casual, jokes about him, but it's, for the most part, he focused on the Christian conservatism because that was public enemy number one. However, eventually, the thing is, a lot of creators and watchers kind of got bored about it. Basically, they're yeah, we get it. Christian conservatives are crazy and lame. Next. But the problem was, that was the religion that was the one causing the most problems in the United States. So there was really no other religion that even really warranted discussing. The viewers, however, for some reason didn't see that. They thought, oh, Obama's president, so the Christian conservatives are gone now. So a lot of these new atheist channels were kind of scrambling. They still did, Christian conservative videos, but it's they need to find a new target. And luckily, it just so happens that there are a lot of religions. But it seemed that Christian conservatism was sort of the most harmful and annoying religion in the United States. How can you beat that? That was when they remembered, oh shit, there's this one other religion that many people claimed was worse than Christianity, and our leaders, Hitchens and Dawkins, also say this. And supposedly, now there's a rise in this particular religion in America. It might not be as annoying, but it sure is more harmful when you actually look at it. That religion, of course, being Islam. So, now there was a brief trend of trying to focus a lot on Islam. However, that almost immediately imploded when a particular group of people rushed to the defense of Islam. And this particular group of people would catch the ire of the entire skeptic community. A group of people we now know as social justice warriors. For those who for some reason don't know what social justice warriors are, social justice warriors, or SJWs, are sort of a continuation of the term keyboard warrior, a term that was used to define people who would be really mean during internet arguments. The difference between them was that social justice warriors had a cause. LGBTQ rights, feminism, protecting religious minorities, etc. Now you might say, what's so bad about that? They were mean to us. I mean mean to us. I mean mean to us. I mean mean to us. They were weak on radical Islam. Oh, and they were mean to us. Now, SJWs were also already getting into fights with atheists due to a particular group called Atheism Plus. It was a group that basically sought to take atheists, like progressive atheists in particular, and then translate it to all atheists to move beyond critiquing like Christian conservatism and instead focus on like a lot of political issues: sexism, racism, persecuting religious minorities, that kind of stuff. And a lot of people were like expressing concerns with sort of problems within the atheist community. One big one was something called Elevator Gate, where an atheist like blogger who was a female, she expressed concerns over sexism within the atheist community, and then when she was on her way to her hotel room, like a guy came into the elevator with her and then invited her to his hotel room, and she was like mad about this, and that caused her to express concerns over this. And of course, a lot of like young male atheists didn't understand what was the problem, and this led to like broader discussions over sexism in the atheist community. Some atheists were a bit more receptive, others were a bit more critical. And one of the things that sort of drove people a little bit was somehow TJ Kirk managed to make his way into the conflict, because he had made some very edgy comments regarding stuff like rape, which made a lot of female atheists go like, yikes. So now lines were drawn. So now we had this group called Social Justice Warriors that was considered weak on radical Islam and weird on like a lot of social issues. And this led to a huge divide within the new atheist movement, because this is just very common with the new atheist movement. They let their views on radical Islam and social issues for some reason drive a wedge between like what they actually believed in. Like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, they were like super avowed socialists, but with the rise of like radical Islam, they just completely became full-on right-wingers. Hitchens was literally cheering on George Bush, literally one of the most Christian conservative candidates and presidents in the history of the United States, and Hitchens was basically cheering him on. And they didn't see an issue with this, because one of the big points of the new atheist movement was that they were supposed to like break down traditional political and religious dogma. So they thought of it like, oh, we're not just going to side with our side because we're supposed to be on their side. If our side is changing their views to be weird, we're not going to stand alongside them. And of course, TJ was right there with them, starting to focus his content on SJWs now. And as I mentioned before, where he would go, thousands of neckbeards would follow. And somehow this group that spent a majority of their time talking about religion decided to randomly make a super majority of their time talking about blue-haired college kids. And this trend got so popular that skeptic channels were literally being created that exclusively talked about SJWs and never even once talked about religion. It got to the point where the so-called skeptic channels, which were originally like left of center, basically became indistinguishable from literal far-right channels. There were some so-called skeptic channels that were literally just conservatives. They weren't people that were reasonably left-wing, but just had some critiques on like these weird, crazy communists. These were like people that were just like full-blown right-wing. Some people that TJ platformed literally just became Nazis. Like, one of the people that was invited on his podcast is a guy called Jean-Francois Grépy, who was like this biologist, who was like this weird French guy, and he was like brought on to like do epic poems against this like crazy conservative Christian called G-Man, and he'd be like, hello, I believe that these are crazy religious ideas. How could you believe any of this stupid bullshit? And his entire community claps for him, and then literally not that long afterwards, he'd be like, it is in objective fact that black people are in fact inferior. They are more related to chimpanzees than they are to the white man. He's not necessarily a skeptic channel, but it's like, you get my point. This was a sphere where it was like, what the right-wingers, like the objective right-wingers were saying was very hard to distinguish from actual, like, skeptics. Like, the skeptics were basically almost a circle with the right-wingers at this point. And the sad truth is, a lot of skeptics that were on the left either moved right with them or were too stupid to realize what was happening and play dumb. TJ was in the latter section. Even when he was being called out on it by other members of the skeptic community, he would usually brush them off as like crazy SJWs who weren't thinking clearly, because he was like, I'm saying the correct things, while other people might say the wrong things, I'm saying the right things. But if you remember from very early on in the episode, you would know that that is a common excuse. Sure, you're saying the right things, but your actions are doing something completely different. You see, while he's saying, like, yes, he is criticizing Hillary Clinton from left-wing perspectives, is he really doing anything but helping Trump? If he's spending the majority of his time talking about like how bad SJWs is, combining that with how bad Hillary Clinton is on a lot of things and how she's basically pandering to this subsection with her identity politics, is he really doing anything but helping Trump in that regard? And TJ didn't realize until way too late that he was definitely doing stuff like that. He made a video where he talked about this, but he didn't really notice this until like after Charlottesville, I think, where it's like he realized if he had any part in playing into leading to that, or leading to Trump getting elected, then he doesn't want that power in that community. So in the immediate aftermath, he sort of started drifting away from that community, doing it through a lot of various ways, leaving his own podcast for Creative Differences, trying to rebrand away from the amazing Atheist label, but unfortunately, it's no avail. This is the label he's going to be known as until he dies. That's why if you're an up-and-coming YouTuber, you need to think very hard about your username, because that username will be your name forever. And the last one being that he generally shifted away from the type of content that he made previously. And TJ has sort of officially like faded into a somewhat level of obscurity. His channel isn't necessarily dead per se, but he definitely isn't in like the same sort of notoriety as he is nowadays. With the rise of the alt-right and BreadTube, he's sort of remained comfortably in the background while these new faces become the ones that inspire a new generation of neckbeard YouTubers. His legacy is very much noted in both of those fields, with unfortunately the skeptics sort of giving birth to literally both of these diametrically opposed viewpoints. And much like every single other thing, when TJ goes, so too did basically the skeptics. Now the thing is, like, the skeptics had already basically dissipated by the time that the alt-right came in, because by that time the skeptics had to make a choice. Like, it was literally like right then and there, you had to make a choice. You would either continue down this path, like the hard line was drawn for the skeptics. They either had to pretend that this was like good, or they had to pretend this was, or they had to like admit that this was bad, and then they couldn't move forward with the community anymore. Some became far right, Sargon. Some became far left, Cult of Dusty. Some people moved on to talk about non-political stuff, like Chris Reagan, and some just flat out left the space altogether. Armored Skeptic, although he would later return, and Mundane Matt. And some would basically pretend that the era is still there, like Shuan had. Like, she seems to still pretend that we're in this era of, like, anti-SJW content, I guess, where she can pretend like, oh no, you see, I support universal healthcare, so that makes it okay for me to hang out with all these far-right Senate candidates. And another big thing that has sort of separated, like, TJ and Shu, because there seems to be some comparison between the two, because they seem to be the only people of this era still around and still in sort of like somewhat relevance in the political sphere. One of the two a little bit more than the other. But TJ, unlike Shu, has expressed basically full remorse for everything he's done. He's acknowledged, like, yeah, what he did was screwed up, and at the end of the day, he really should not have done any of it. Okay, well, that's like a little strong, but you get the sort of general idea. And now we get to the part where I basically have to say, yeah, I'm basically in that camp of people inspired by TJ Kirk. I mean, if you've watched this channel before, you probably already know all this. Like, I wouldn't be in the position that I would be politically or religiously now if it weren't for TJ. I was there since I was 12. So, literally right when the anti-SJW phase of his channel began. And I was there for the whole time. And it's because I was there, I'm able to understand a lot of things that a lot of people just don't. Like, there are a lot of people that really do not grasp, like, oh, how could people have fallen to the far right? And it's like, I was there during this era. I grew up during this era. I saw it directly with my own eyes. I was there to see the cognitively underdeveloped people see this era. The old drunken peasant, like, things literally just had, like, a bunch of people just spamming swastikas in there. It was a bunch of underdeveloped, like, neckbeard, atheist children that were, like, that didn't know what to do, and a lot of them were white, so they just fell into whatever crowd they wanted. Thankfully, I've been able to, at the very least, able to maintain the rational part of the whole sphere, and TJ will forever be grandfathered into my subscription feed. So anyways, that's all I have to say on that. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you want more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.